Welcome back to Organized Chaos. This is episode 19, and today I want to talk about organizational structures and why they are important to a startup success. Org structure is not just about creating an org chart and deciding your reporting lines. It's a mechanism that helps you organize your business functions, people, and processes in a way that aligns with and allows you to execute your company's strategy. Whether you're a startup founder or an HR leader, my goal in this episode is to explain how org structures can impact your startup and the considerations you need to make in order to design the right one for your business. So, why does organizational structure matter? The answer is very simple. Your org structure directly determines how your company makes decisions, which business functions it prioritizes, and how its employees interact to deliver business value. An org structure is not just a diagram of boxes that visualizes the reporting lines across the organization. It has a significant impact on how your company operates. Most importantly, your org structure should be a direct reflection of your company's business strategy. The core purpose of an org structure is to enable your organization to achieve its strategic objectives. But what does that mean exactly? Let me demonstrate this with a few examples. Let's say that you're an early stage fintech startup that is building a SaaS platform for the virtual banking industry. In order for your startup to be successful, you have to build a reliable and secure product that virtual banks want to use. From an org structure perspective, this translates into a focus on three core functions: product, engineering, and information security. In other words, your organization structure must prioritize these three business functions and ensure they are leading the charge in terms of decision making and receiving the lion's share of any resource prioritization. Let's take another example. If you're running a global B2C e commerce computer peripherals business, your goal is to maximize your sales, but also ensure that you can meet demand without breaking the bank with supply chain and logistics costs. A business like this one has three different focus areas: product, marketing, and supply chain. Each of these examples demonstrates a different strategic focus. The fintech startup must prioritize product engineering and information security, while the B2C e commerce company must prioritize product marketing and supply chain. I call these functions the business drivers, and they're the functions that should report to the CEO by default. Having said that, it's important to talk about how to decide which functions report to the founder or CEO. Identifying the functions that drive value to your business and help you deliver on your strategic priorities are the functions you need to elevate in the org structure. When I say elevate, I mean these functions report directly to the founder or CEO. The reason for this is simple. The commander in chief has to focus on these business driving functions to achieve the company's goals. If you have critical functions buried in the organization, then it'll be harder for the founder or CEO to receive the information they need to make quick decisions, regardless of how good your company's communication lines are. And this issue becomes more pronounced during hypergrowth as the company starts adding more people and management layers. In addition to the business drivers, there are a few functions that I believe should always report to the CEO, and they are finance, because it manages your company's money; growth, because it manages your company's revenue generation; and HR, because it manages your most important asset, your people. In summary, every function that has a profound impact on the core business should report to the CEO. As the final decision maker in the organization, the CEO needs input from all of these functions to make good decisions. I've seen many CEOs try to minimize the number of business areas they manage by burying important functions under others. But every single time, they end up reversing that decision after a major incident that could have been avoided with the appropriate executive visibility. This is a good segue into the topic of span of control. One of the most common questions I get is, what is the maximum number of people that a single person should manage? Well, it depends. I've seen managers with one direct report and managers with 10 direct reports. It really depends on the type of work being done. But when it comes to organizations that rely on knowledge based workers, the sweet spot is somewhere between 4 to 6 direct reports. Knowledge based workers do relatively complex work, and they need more guidance, coaching, and support. I personally don't recommend stretching it beyond 7 direct reports because by then, you are stretching your people managers too thin, and they really won't be able to manage effectively. That's when things start falling through the cracks. Spans of control grow over time as the company matures, mainly because the overall operation and its processes become more robust and efficient. Such companies require less managerial oversight to run smoothly and less manager input for work to get done. The systems in place at this stage of maturity can generate more complete data and provide better reporting. So managers are better able to manage using data as opposed to relying on people for all the insights. Now, we can't talk about span of control without addressing the topic of levels or layers of management within your org structure. Unsurprisingly, early stage startups tend to have a flat structure with no or few formal reporting lines. As startups scale and mature, they start adding layers for a few reasons. First, the increasing span of control becomes a bottleneck. So the scaling startup creates additional layers to really accommodate the growing headcount. Job roles also transform from generalist or jack of all trade kind of job roles into more specialized ones. This happens because the breadth, depth, and volume of work generally increases as a company is scaling. For example, most early stage startups have an HR department of one, and that person does everything in HR and sometimes more. But as the company starts experiencing success, they might hire a few recruiters to support the company's growing hiring needs. As the startup goes into full scale up mode, the HR department might add several more recruiters and hire a talent acquisition manager to just oversee the hiring function, while also maybe adding other HR sub functions in the process. Most functions evolve and expand in a similar fashion as the company starts growing. The next thing I want to address is the relationship between your org structure and the individual job roles that exist in your company. If you're an HR professional, what I'm talking about is job architecture. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, job architecture is a structured framework that helps you organize all the roles within an organization and categorizes them based on job families, functions, levels, and career tracks. The purpose of a job architecture is to create a foundational system for organizing, managing, and evolving a company's workforce to align with its operational and strategic needs as it grows. I'll address job architecture in a separate episode soon because it's a broad and complex topic. But for the context of this episode, let's just focus on the individual job roles that a company creates within its org structure. The most common misstep I see scaling startups make is to create narrow job roles early in their growth. This move is always made with good intentions and is generally a proactive move in anticipation of continued hypergrowth. More times than not, though, these narrow jobs don't have enough work for a full time employee. So this ends up being a bad investment that could have been better deployed in other areas of the business. So my recommendation is always to start with job roles that are broadly defined and have the capability of doing more rather than less. And you can always go more specific as you grow. Don't try to be very narrow with your job roles and try to overstretch yourself with resource allocation. Start with broad, defined roles and then narrow as you grow. And in the meantime, try to generate some capacity type metrics in order to determine when that breaking point is. Org structures are also not static. They change over time for many reasons, and leaders should always evaluate whether their structure is fit for purpose. Unfortunately, most leaders only focus on org structure when problems start popping up. These problems are generally related to slow decision making, misalignment of core functions, and just bloated processes. And this brings me to my final topic: processes. Process is not something most founders think of when they hear the term organization structure. But if you take a step back and think about it, it'll make sense. When you're designing or revamping your org structure, you're essentially rearranging your company's functions and reprioritizing which ones the business will focus on based on the strategy you are pursuing. This means changes in business priorities, decision making criteria, and also levels of authority. So, without appropriate changes to processes, the org structure can cause more problems than it tries to solve. To close things out, let's tie it all together here. As you might have concluded at this point, a startup's organization structure is the core building block that enables it to deliver on its strategic goals. A great business strategy with a lousy org structure that doesn't align with the strategy might not cause the startup to fail, but it'll make it a hell of a lot harder to succeed. Revolve your org structure around your business drivers. They are the functions that drive value and have the biggest impact on your strategic goals. Org structures are evolving organisms. Don't expect them to remain unchanged for long, especially if you're in a hyper-growth environment. It's actually healthy for a startup to proactively evaluate if its org structure is fit for purpose and act accordingly when needed. If your company is growing headcount by more than 20% year over year, then I advise you to evaluate your org structure every single year. Don't try to force your structure into being flat. If your average manager span of control is nearing 6 employees, then you know it's time to consider a new job level in your org structure. Be careful not to create very narrow roles early on and bloat your headcount prematurely, because that's how you start flirting with layoffs. And finally, don't forget your processes. Process design must follow org design, or else you're rolling out a half-baked structure that will cause confusion due to the inconsistency between your reporting lines and process-based decisions. A good example here is if you have, let's say, a finance department that used to report to the COO at one point and now reports to the CEO, you would expect that all decision-making processes around financial approvals that used to be approved by the COO have to be changed in order for them to be provided now to the CFO or maybe the CEO. So just a basic change in reporting line can trigger a domino effect in terms of the day-to-day operational processes that a company runs. If you'd like to learn more about the basics of org structures, I recommend checking out the Business of People newsletter by Melissa Theis, who is a good friend of the show. You'll find a link to Melissa's Org Design 101 newsletter edition in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week's episode. If you have any questions or need help evaluating your startup's org structure, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email to hello@organizedchaos.fyi. See you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review wherever you get your podcasts. This will help me spread the word about Organized Chaos and keep the show going. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to suggest for the show, please send me an email to hello@organizedchaos.fyi. For more content and resources, make sure to check out the website at organizedchaos.fyi. See you on the next one.